I used to teach at an all I used to teach at an all-girls school, so I had to go down 3 floors to the only male bathroom.
Oh no.
Minutes. So, welcome. We're together by ourselves, so that should be fun and interesting. So feel free to ask any questions that you have, and anything like that. Just to get started, where I'm Jesse, I'm the program manager for Echoes and Reflections. I was a former high school teacher. I have a master's degree in Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and I think I have one more year left of calling myself a PhD student, as my dissertation just kind of like sits in the closet and untouched. So that probably runs out after 5 years that I can't keep calling me a student for something I'm not doing. So Echoes and Reflections is a joint program where with the Anti-Defamation League, USC Shoah Foundation, and Yad Vashem. We've been around since 2005. We've helped over 100,000 teachers across the country. And today's kind of session is really focused on our direct to student learning, and really looking at our student activities. So about 4 years ago, we did our first student facing resource with the timeline of the Holocaust, which is this amazing timeline that shows 1933 to 1945 with lots of assets and non-Jewish victims of Nazi aggression as well as tons of testimony and photographs and student resources and all of that. It was really successful. And so this past year, we've also started really delving into student activities. So we've listened to teachers that, even if they're not virtual anymore, that students still need kind of these self-directed student activities that they can do. And so that's what today's session is about. So I'll give kind of a background of anti-Semitism. We'll do a little bit background about Echoes, and then I really do want to give you some time just to explore the activities or one of the activities, whatever that you think. So this might actually turn out kind of well to not have a giant group. So they'll give you a little bit more time to kind of just independently dive into it. So as we kind of focus in on what we do, we always start with our principles of pedagogy. These kind of our North Star of what we want to make sure we're doing to teach the Holocaust as effectively and efficiently and safely as possible. So we'll definitely talk about providing a background on the history of anti-Semitism today. We'll hopefully foster empathy using testimonies, and also encourage critical thinking. And I always like to kind of talk about in these virtual aspects, especially as we know students are interacting on near minute by minute basis in the virtual sphere of how do we take that virtual sphere and make it educational as well, so that they're not just doing social emotional learning or socially interacting with each other on a fun basis, but also making it an educational experience as well. So I think that we've done that with these student activities, and hopefully you'll find that as well. The plan is to kind of continue to roll these out over the next few years. And so we rolled out the first 5 this year. They were released in late August, to some pretty good numbers so far, which has been kind of exciting, to have a couple of thousand students already kind of take these and also get some really good feedback about them. They range from the basic of what was the Holocaust and talking about contemporary anti-Semitism as well, but also, what was Jewish life like before the Holocaust as well, which is kind of really important to center this conversation that Jews that were not living in the shadow of the Holocaust or just waiting for the calamity, but they lived their lives as people first. And so that's our focus for today. I will walk you through what is anti-Semitism 1. And then hopefully, Rainey, you'll have a chance to kind of pick a different one and kind of walk through it and see what you like as well in kind of the half hour that we have together. So looking at our first principle here, or one of our first principles of providing background. And so with that, take a look at this map. And if you want to kind of talk through it, this map is of Jewish communities before the Nazi rise to power. So this is an early, this is basically the end of 1932, the beginning of 1933. This map shows the number of Jews living in each country throughout Europe and the kind of upper Middle East, as well as the percentage of their population in each of these places. So, one of the things we love to do with this map is to just do a simple kind of see, think, wonder, like what's some really basic things that you see. If you want to answer that, or I can just keep kind of talking through it. Whatever you'd like. You get to pick whatever you want to do today.
It's a choose your own adventure.
It is. That's a great way for it. So what are some like really basic things that you see, right? Like this is a map. Good. What else do we see?
I'm just thinking my students' answers to things like that. Definitely, definitely did not realize the small amount of the population of like Poland and Germany and the Soviet Union that were Jewish. In the overall, like again, Soviet Union, 3 million, but it's only 1% of the population. I didn't realize, I guess, maybe that there was that many people in the Soviet Union before, at that point in time.
Yeah. And if we think about kind of what our students kind of think, or if they kind of take some of their knowledge about like what do they think Polish Jews look like, and that they think that they're all over the place. And like, yes, Poland here has a little over 3 million Jews, 3.3 million Jews, but in a country that has over 30 million people in it. So we're talking about 10%, and that's the largest percentage that's on this map, and it's still very small, and it's also very isolated to cities and to small towns that we call shtetls. So, hopefully some of that students will pull from this map. Hopefully a really basic one, that there are Jews everywhere, which I think maybe the students don't realize. They've probably never heard of Jews in Algeria, or be able to point out Tunisia in a map. But they're everywhere, right? They live all throughout Europe, and depending on how much time you have, you can talk about why that's the case. That Jews have continually been, have found places to live, have settled down, have lived there, have built their lives, have learned the language, have been assimilated to the culture and the country and the society, and then at different points of that time been kicked out. And largely kind of moved east to the Pale of Settlement, which is Poland, Ukraine, Romania, Soviet Union. So something to also kind of show students if you're teaching a really long world history class, right? That we could do that. And then obviously when we're talking about the Holocaust, we're talking about Germany. And so we always want to focus students to look at Germany here. Germany has about 525,000 Jews at the beginning of 1933, which is roughly 1% of the population, which is about how many Jews are in the US in terms of population percentage now. About 2% live in the US now. So that tiny percentage, what are some of the inferences we can make? What are some of the kind of deductions we can make about German society now that we know that Jews make up about 1%? Not to put you on the spot. If you don't want to answer, you just shake your head no, and then I'll go. It's no problem. Yeah. So we have 500. We have
on that one.
Okay. So there's 525,000, which they think is a big number, but is not. A country that has 50 million people in it, that's almost nothing. Jews are largely live in the cities. Again, if we want to talk about the history of where we allow Jews to live, and where there are laws about where they can live, what kind of jobs they can have, where they can bury their dead, all of those aspects. And so if we think about German society, we can say that, well, in the cities, most people probably knew Jews. They probably shopped at Jewish shops. They probably knew that they were Jewish, maybe, probably just by the name. And that's probably about it. If we think about the vast majority of Germany, they probably have never met a Jew before. They might have, a token Jew in their town. It might be a neighbor or someone that owns a store or is a cobbler or whatever. But they probably don't interact with Jews very often, if at all. We're basically just talking about the most of this country, right? If we want to talk about and make connections, the vast majority of the United States in the Midwest and in these small kind of rural populations, they probably have maybe a Jew, maybe not. They might be 99.5% white. I mean, so we're talking about a country that is probably built pretty similar in terms of their interaction with Jews. And so what does that allow? And what can that teach us about the powers of anti-Semitism? That it's actually helpful that people don't know Jews in terms of propagating anti-Semitism and creating it and fostering it. It shows the power of media. It shows the power of fear. It shows kind of the power of conspiracy theories to really animate a population, one that is feeling down, has lost World War I, has been blamed for World War I, has crippling inflation, has been embarrassed on the world stage. So there's so many kind of inferences we can make about anti-Semitism here. And as we think about that, we also think about our other principle of pedagogy here to define terms. So this big, long definition, if we just look at the first sentence, anti-Semitism is the term for hatred of Jews as a group or a concept. And I always like to kind of talk about this as putting the in front of the Jew. So the Jew. So not talking about a person or a group of people or something that's based on evidence or supported by fact or rational. That anti-Semitism is irrational, it's illogical, it's baseless, it's not supported by facts or evidence, that it's this kind of nefarious topic that is believed and animated to explain things that are unpleasant, or to blame, or just to blindly hate as well. So kind of just thinking about that first sentence, and when we teach students to really make sure that they understand that this is irrational, illogical. It's not supported on evidence or facts. And so if we think of that in terms of German society, and most of the people, if they never met a Jew, they probably did know Rothschild because he was a big famous banker, right? And so does that mean that all Jews are rich? Does that mean that all Jews are greedy? And so making sure that anecdotal evidence doesn't count as fact or solutions as well. Just making sure our students recognize that illogical nature of anti-Semitism. And so with that, we have about 20 minutes. So I'm going to just kind of walk you through one of the activities just to kind of show you how it goes. And then I'll let you kind of take your time and look through one as well. And then we'll kind of reconvene and just kind of share some thoughts about how you can use these in your classroom. There is the eyewitness platform, which you do have to register for and all of that. So if you don't know about that, I can show it to you. But these lessons live in the eyewitness platform here. And I can just throw, this is how you register if you don't know how to. But these activities are built on Eyewitness's kind of platform of the 4 C's, which is, if we look kind of at this outline, to consider. So students get information to think about, to explore. Then there's collect. So now they take words that they've seen, they collect their thoughts, they construct, so they build something, they demonstrate their knowledge, and then they communicate. So again, that social part of viewing other students' work, commenting, communicating with students, and learning alongside their peers, which obviously we know is crucial. So this is our what is anti-Semitism. We'll skip kind of this first testimony, but I do want to at least show you one testimony. But again, in this consider section, we have a testimony. Students are given a question to kind of fill out and answer and kind of think about it. There's some more information about Jews and Judaism if your students are not too aware. And again, this is in text form, it's in video, it's in audio as well. So students that have multiple ways of learning, what their best way of learning. We have this definition that we just kind of delved into with them. And then another video for them to kind of watch and consider all of these things. So with that, then they're taught next to collect. So to kind of collect 10 words to help them, what would they, what 10 words would they pick to kind of describe anti-Semitism, and then they would explain why they picked those words. They'd create a word cloud here, and title it, and then reflect on what they created. And so we have kind of like a set one here, of what was the takeaways that they had and what they created. And then we have to communicate, where they can see their peers, their responses, they can comment on them, they can talk about them. And so it's kind of a cool way to build these kind of self-directed activities and bring students into the virtual sphere in an educational way. So there are different types of activities, so it's not always a word cloud. Sometimes it's creating something else. There's also a really cool iWalk that maybe be great for you to take a look at on your own. But I do want to just show you one testimony and get your thoughts. Sorry for the headache here. Just to kind of, it's fundamental to what we do. So our website, echoesandreflections.org, you go to the Teach tab, we're under our lesson plans, and we're going to be in lesson 3 here. And I want to introduce you to Margaret Lambert. She's one of our superstars. She was born in Germany in 1914. She was an athlete. She actually made the 1936 Olympic team for Germany before being kicked off because she was Jewish. She eventually made it to the United States, escaped before the war, made it to the United States, and lived and she passed away, I think, in 1997, 2003, something like that. So she lived a long life as a coach and really loved sports. And we actually have her in two testimonies. In the first one, she kind of talks about how she was a regular kid, that she liked sports. She wouldn't wear clothes that her mother bought her, and kind of a lot of personality. And here she's going to talk about how that changed in 1933. So we'll just, a word or a phrase that jumps out to you, or something like that, or a body language, voice intonation, something that you can read for social emotional cues. So here she is.
It started in 1933, really. But I had very good friends of whom I knew that they were members of the Nazi Party since 1928. And she was one of my best friends. She didn't care that I was Jewish, and I didn't care that she was a Nazi. She was one of my sports friends, and we got along very well. But then, of course, in 1933, everything changed. Like overnight, you could not go into a public place, no restaurants, no swimming pools, no movies, nothing. You couldn't. You were not allowed in any public place anymore. And the people that you knew wouldn't talk to you anymore. Friends that you had, they would shun you, most of them. Not because they hated us all of a sudden, but they were all afraid, because that was the way it was. You talk to a Jew and you'll be punished. It was very hard. I was 19 years old, and all of a sudden I was shut off from everything. I got a letter from my sports club in Ulm that I wasn't welcome there anymore because I was Jewish, and that was the thing that I loved to do most, as I said before, sports. And all of a sudden that was finished. There was nothing I could do. We just were really vegetating, if you want to call it that.
So that's Margaret. So any thoughts or social emotional cues or anything that from Margaret that you want to share?
I mean, there's a few things, like the fact that she was mentioning, like, our best friend was a Nazi, but it didn't really mean anything to them at that time until later. But really got me to the point where, we're just vegetating because there's nothing we could do. We just, basically, you could sit at home and do nothing at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things I've been thinking about, of like, she, in her other testimony that we didn't watch, she talks about how I was the only Jew in the class. She's the only girl in my class, never made a difference. And yet it always made a difference. It just didn't matter until it did. That she was always different, but until it became popular and before it became animated, that those differences really kind of showed. I don't want to say ruined her life, but she was 19 and now no friends and all the things that she loved. And so she just felt like she was stuck, right? That she couldn't do anything. And that ending is so powerful, which is always why we love to show it, that kind of hopelessness and that despair. So we have about 10 minutes. So I want to kind of just use these as guiding questions, right? Like think about how you use activities in your classroom, how these digital activities might be helpful in what you do and how you plan, and how they could enhance student learning in new and exciting ways. And then I want to just put this link in the chat. So this is our page that kind of has our student activities kind of laid out, the 5 that are there. And so love to give you, I guess, like 5 or 7 minutes if you want to just dive into one and take a look at it and see if it's helpful or something that's cool. I can tell you that this one, number 2, is a virtual eye walk. And so what it does is it takes Google images of this town of Chernov in Poland, where Ika Zygmuntowicz lived, and it pairs it with her testimony and her family photographs. And so you get to see kind of what she talks about and what that place looks like today, as she kind of like talks about her life before the war. So that one is awesome and really cool. The other ones are more are closer aligned to the one that I kind of briefly showed, where it's lots of information and create something. And then but number 2 is kind of the outlier in terms of fun and exciting. So it's we have 11 minutes before the hour, so maybe I'll give you like 5 or 6 minutes if you want to go off camera and take a look at it or whatever, and just kind of explore it a little bit, and then maybe we can just kind of wrap up a couple of minutes of any questions you had, or if there are resources I can show you or give to you, or if you have feedback or anything like that. All right, cool. Let me know if you need any help signing into Eyewitness, or if there's any issues. Or
what was it? Thankfully, I've used it before. I've used Eyewitness and Echoes Reflections a little bit off and on. The only reason I would love to do more, especially with the testimonies, one of my issues is I have a very large population of non-English speakers, and a lot of the videos, unless they're ones that are like have been put on YouTube, like they don't have translations,
right.
So that's why I've had to be very picky on, because like I know under Eyewitness there's like 4 or 5 that have been set up with, that are like, I know like this, the Kinder Transport. I've used the videos before because there is some in it in Spanish. But that's just kind of my largest, one of my bigger issues is I have such a large non-English speaking population.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I wish I could help more. I mean, that's literally a conversation that we have all the time. I can tell you, it's all the time we have that conversation. Mm-hmm. I know that Shoah Foundation is doing a lot. They're working a lot with like Chile and some other Latin American countries to translate their stuff and things like that. And that's all I can help you with. Yeah. But I understand.
Yeah, like I haven't looked too much at some of these activities, but I know I've done things with the Eyewitness and the videos, but and I am finding more that have been like this first, like for the studying the Holocaust, for that first unit.
Yeah.
Their videos, some of these videos are YouTube, so you're able to get those YouTube translations, which has been a light that's changed since I've last really sat down and played it with this. So I enjoy that. It's opening up more for me to be able to use. So thank y'all. So let's see.
And Rain, just so you know, the session survey is in the chat whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. So for these student activities, is it just the unit? It's like, I see they say aligned with unit 1, unit 2. Do y'all just have 2 units so far, or is there more and I just don't know where to find them?
We definitely have way more than 2 units. We tried to focus in on kind of the foundational parts on this. We do talk about, there's the one on contemporary anti-Semitism, so that's our unit 11, but they're largely focused on the first couple of units this time. So yeah, we are kind of balancing between, like, do we do it chronological, or do we kind of just do whatever we want to really do? But I guess we went more the chronological and kind of foundational route.
Yeah. And then I finally realized, hey, I could just click on lesson plans in the sidebar and they're there. So that answered my question.
Yeah, and this session was mostly focused just to, like, show you the student activities, but all 10, like, we have 11 units. The 11th unit is contemporary anti-Semitism, which was released in 2020, which I know means that it was immediately outdated. But the other 10 units have been updated within the last year. So they were kind of, I could have done the session on any of them because they really push student inquiry, and there's a lot of graphic organizers and really pushing kind of how we teach today than what we used to. So hopefully all 10 of our units better reflect that. And then we'll see how these self-directed activities kind of meld with that model too.
Yep.
Is there anything specific that you teach, or that, you know, as we have like a few more minutes, that you teach, or that you want any recommendation, guidance, or I don't know, anything specific while I have you and you have all the floor?
Well, I teach 10th grade world history, and this is very appropriate to the fact that we're coming back from spring break, or from winter break. We start moving into the 20th century. We're going to be starting moving into there, and so this is when we start getting into, between, you know, January to spring break is when we start talking about, you know, Armenian genocide and the Holocaust, and even the, you know, even though not really labeled genocides, but, you know, the African division of Africa, you know, things like that. And so we do get it. So Willie does work reminding me this resource and refreshing my mind on how to use it to get there. My biggest thing, and I did, my first 2 sessions was also part of this with Kim.
Yeah.
And she kind of, here's a question my kids always ask me, and I can never answer it. And you might be able to. And I always go, why did Hitler blame the Jews? Is there really a true, it's like why did he hate them so much?
Yeah, I don't think he's alone in hating Jews that much,
Yeah,
right?
he's
So I
not.
think I think that's maybe how I would answer that question first, is like, you know, the name of Hitler, but I can tell you the millions of people that hate Jews just as much as him, that just don't have the power that he had. So I think that's a great place to start in terms of kind of showing the widespread and like systematic and systemic nature of anti-Semitism. And then I would just kind of go with lots of reasons, and you know, you can't give a 2,000-year answer to that question, but I think important to show that, you know, there are still millions of people in this world now that hate Jews just as much as Hitler did, and maybe more. And 2, of like, there's a confluence of reasons. There's, you know, from anti-Jewish, you know, religious hatred, to racially categorizing Jews as Jews just being a really small minority, and so they get blamed because no one's standing up for them. And you know, I think depending on how much you want to get into everything, you know, it gets to that, how you answer that question. I mean, they're also a scapegoat. There are also parts of Judaism that they, you know, believe in education, that gives, you know, that, you know, education is power. And so a people that believes in education has a better likelihood of rising above poverty and things like that. So, you know, a 5,000-year history of education, it shows, you know, gives gives credence to the conspiracy theories as well, right? Like, you can always point to a well-educated Jew and say they have too much power, because they have 5,000 years of culture and belief in education. So you could also kind of plug the kids to study on that too. Yeah, but I just don't think there's an answer. I mean, there's a, you know, I think you know, there's hundreds of books and things to answer that question. But I think I guess I would put it in two ways. The first way being that Hitler's not unique, that on that, and the second one being that there's lots of reasons. It depends on your society, of fear, of history, of religious hatred, of racial hatred, of scapegoating, of, you know, that Jews were different, that they were always different, and so they've been hated for 4,000 years because of it. You know, whether it's because they took Saturday off, or, you know, if you're, that's the religion teacher in me, that they were, you know.
That's, you know, even through all this, we just finished talking about French Revolution and, you know, Napoleon and the Jews and all that, like all these years. And I'll always try to mention, like, yeah, at this point, this is happening, trying to build that throughout the year. And then I'm like, because they're different. Like, I don't know, just because they're different was the best way I was able to say it.
Yeah, and you're doing a good job if you're like, not that world history has to be doom and gloom, but it largely is. But by tracing that throughout, then like they can see the foundations that were laid in Christian Europe, basically, that, you know, became the festering cesspool that allowed the Holocaust to happen. So you're doing a great job as you kind of be like, and then, you know, like, we figured, you know, I even told the story, like John Smith, who figures out cholera, and it's the water making British people sick. You're like, well, who poisoned the water? Well, of course it was the Jews. And like, no matter how smart you are, like, that was always the go-to answer. So, you know, even the smartest scientists that figure out the water is making people sick can't explain why, and so it must be the Jews. So even something that we think of as like this great scientific achievement is not really there.
All right, thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions, concerns? I'll throw my email in the chat if you need anything or anything like that. Thanks for spending 40 minutes with me. I hope it was worthwhile and beneficial. And
yeah, thank you, Rain. And then just so you know, before you go, let's see, at 12:10 we have a lunch and learn, so if you want to listen to a keynote speaker while you eat, you can do that. And the next session in here is with Jesse, and it is about memory, justice, and life after the Holocaust. So thank you for being our participants.
Thank you for still having, well, just me here.
Yeah, of course. All right, bye guys, have a good lunch.
Have a great guy.